Hi, I'm Dodie Sanders with the University of Georgia Marine Extension and Georgia Sea Grant. We've been out in the field on a small island off the coast of Georgia to witness an amazing event, spawning horseshoe crabs. Found along the Atlantic coast, northern Gulf, and Yucatan Peninsula, the American horseshoe crab, otherwise known as Limulus polyphemus, have inhabited this earth for over 400 million years. So let's take a closer look at how horseshoe crabs make the journey from the oceans, the bays, and the sounds to coastal beaches to nest. It's believed that environmental factors like water temperature and currents act as a trigger and signal the horseshoe crabs to move from deeper water to the coastal beaches to spawn. Horseshoe crabs that inhabit areas in the northern Gulf, Florida and Georgia, have two breeding seasons. For Georgia, peak spawning usually occurs in early May, with smaller spawning events occurring during the summer. And as you move along the Atlantic coast northward, horseshoe crabs spawn later in the season, with peaks occurring May through June. And we'd like to thank Dr. Jane Brockman for providing this graphic. Horseshoe crabs spawn during a full or new moon during the highest high tides, and that's the time that you're most likely to encounter huge numbers of horseshoe crabs on the beach. Typically, horseshoe crab spawning events occur 2 days before and 5 days after a full or a new moon. How successful a particular spawning event? Well, that's influenced by a lot of different factors. One is wind. If it's too windy, horseshoe crabs may get overturned and stranded. Water currents, indicative of greater tidal range. Water temperatures, usually between 60 degrees Fahrenheit and 90 degrees Fahrenheit. The beach slope. The horseshoe crabs require a slope of at least 2 to 3 degrees to be able to find their way back to the water. And sand quality. That's the grain size of the sand affects the amount of oxygen present. And the eggs develop better when oxygen levels are higher. Some areas of Georgia beaches where horseshoe crabs commonly spawn have both sand and oyster shell material. While we are out in the field witnessing this event, we also encounter many species of migratory shorebirds. Horseshoe crab eggs are an important source of food for many migratory shorebirds during their annual migration from wintering grounds in South America to their Arctic nesting sites. They time their migration to coincide with spawning horseshoe crab events so that they can forage on the eggs, doubling their weight to fuel their long 20,000-mile journey. It's important to note that if you do encounter spawning horseshoe crabs and migratory shorebirds foraging on the eggs, to not disturb the birds. The less time the birds have to forage means that they have less food that they need to migrate and to nest in the Arctic. Red knots, ruddy turnstones, and sandpipers are just some of the birds that we see here along the Georgia coast. Horseshoe crabs will spawn on beaches with a slope. For the Georgia coast, spawning events tend to occur in areas of calmer water, including protected areas on the backside of barrier islands. Coastal Georgia has a tidal range of about 8 to 10 feet, so horseshoe crabs will nest both subtidally, that's under the tides, and intertidally, between the tides. Take a look again at the substrate, and we can see a mixture of that sand and oyster shell material. We see that horseshoe crabs are able to use the high tide to nest in the upper reaches of the intertidal zone. There's both benefits and risks to nesting in the high intertidal zone. These areas are ideal for horseshoe crab eggs because the oxygen levels are higher in substrate made up of sand grains than in finer silts and clays found lower on the beach where oxygen levels are much lower. High intertidal nesting ensures successful egg development and survivorship. There are risks, though. If we think about nesting intertidally, horseshoe crabs could get stranded high on the beach. Eggs could dry up due to higher substrate temperatures. Predation by seagulls if they're overturned. Sunlight damage, there's breeding competition. The eggs, as you saw here, get disturbed by other horseshoe crabs, and just the physiological stresses of being high on the beach. So why do they mass spawn? And one theory is that it may reduce predation. Large numbers could be a defense mechanism against predation of adults, the eggs, and even the larvae. So how do horseshoe crabs spawn? Horseshoe crabs are the only arthropod, that's a large group of organisms with jointed appendages, that have external fertilization. The males release the sperm, and the females release the eggs through gonopores located underneath the operculum. Some of the males are already attached to females as they approach the beach, while some of the males are not paired or unattached to females, like the two you saw on the left. These unattached males will seek out horseshoe crab pairs on the shoreline and become what we refer to as satellite males. How does the male locate the female? Well, while still subtitle, males will use their compound eyes. They can see about 3 feet or so to locate a female. The satellite males, however, will use their eyes and chemical cues to locate a horseshoe crab pair in the intertidal zone. Although percentages vary with regard to paternity, studies have shown that the satellite males contribute to the fertilization of eggs, as does the attached male. If we consider the condition and age of the horseshoe crab exoskeleton, or that outer carapace, we see that the males have attached with females prior to reaching the beach tend to be younger adults. They're lighter in color, they have more protective slime on the surface of their carapace, less fouling by other organisms, and their carapace is in good condition than the older unattached males. How does the male attach to the female? Well, the male attaches to the female's opistosomal spines with its modified first pair of appendages or walking legs, sometimes referred to as claspers. And the male can remain attached to the female for periods of a week or longer. Attached males don't feed while attached to the female. The hypothesis is that this is too costly for older males, and that is why the younger males attach to the females. This is a model of a female horseshoe crab. Both the male and the females have a fine network of tubules where the eggs and the sperm are stored. Here you see the green eggs. The female horseshoe crab nests several times during a season, which could take anywhere from hours to days. And the males will return repeatedly, most likely why you tend to see more males than females. The female with the male attached burrows into the sand and lays eggs in a sand water slurry in multiple nests. Like you see here, the nests are about 10 to 15 centimeters deep and can contain anywhere from 2,000 to 4,000 eggs per nest. And the female can lay up to 90,000 eggs in just one season. Here we see on the left image what the horseshoe crab eggs look like. Opaque now, the eggs will eventually clear as the larvae develop. If you look closely, you can see a horseshoe crab larvae inside of its egg on the right-hand side. Here you can see horseshoe crab larvae still inside of its egg. The larvae will emerge about 2 weeks after fertilization during the next high tide. And at this stage of development, the larvae are referred to as a trilobite larvae. And you notice that the telson, or its tail, is greatly reduced at this stage. This is actually live video of horseshoe crabs emerging from their egg. You see the two to the left, but then the one up in the right-hand corner is trying desperately to get out of to emerge from its egg. And just keep your eye on it. It's gonna shift here in a minute and swim down to the bottom of the slide. Really cool to watch. And there we go. Cool. Juvenile horseshoe crabs, once they emerge, they spend a lot of time in the intertidal flats, feeding and foraging. And as horseshoe crabs get older, they tend to move into deeper and deeper water. So that pretty much concludes our horseshoe spawning event. I'm very glad that you had an opportunity to join us today. And I will say that if you ever get a chance to view spawning horseshoe crabs, it's a really cool adventure. It's something to see. So thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you on the water.